Ferrari starts the 2025 Formula One season in the worst possible way. The Australian Grand Prix, the opening round of the F1 World Championship, began on Friday with an illusion. Ferrari seemed to be at the level of McLaren. But the dream of a red dawn had already partially faded on Friday, when tire pressure issues and adverse weather conditions put both Italian cars in serious difficulty. The Maranello team did not express its potential, but the alarm bell must be sounded nonetheless. Moreover, when things could have been corrected, the tire change from slicks to wets in the second part of the race, at the 5.278-kilometer Albert Park Grand Prix circuit in Melbourne, was made with wrong timing. A wrong strategy, trying luck like a roulette spin, without properly reflecting on the possible consequences. Team McLaren as well as Red Bull and Mercedes appeared significantly better in wet conditions, setting a faster pace in the first stint. The papaya-colored cars maintained a pace around 1.5 seconds faster than Charles Leclerc. Only Max Verstappen, in the first 7 laps after the restart, managed to keep pace with the MCL 39 single-seaters, then losing second place to Oscar Piastri due to a mistake. At that point, Oscar Piastri proves to be faster than his McLaren teammate and closes the gap to under 1 second. Overtaking seems imminent, but the team intervenes immediately over the radio in order to inform the Australian driver to freeze the positions. A few laps later, a small mistake on the exit of Turn 6 costs Oscar Piastri over 2 seconds in a single lap, effectively closing any possibility of attacking Lando Norris and extinguishing the only potential battle at the front. The Dutch driver could no longer stabilize tire temperature due to the lack of water on track, losing over a second per lap in the middle part of the stint. In all this, the Ferrari car is completely absent. Charles Leclerc's SF-25 proves to be completely powerless, already accumulating over 30 seconds of delay from the leader after the first 30 laps. An unforgiving statistic that translates to an average pace over a second slower per lap compared to the best. The problem is not just the car's nervous behavior, but rather the inability to further reduce lap times. Charles Leclerc's pace was far from constant, showing a general lack of confidence in the car. The SF-25 was unstable. The Ferrari drivers were forced to make many corrections with the steering wheel, almost constantly delaying throttle input on the exit. The Monegasque driver spent the first part of the race behind George Russell, but with a constantly slower pace. The Englishman made a difference, particularly in the third sector, where the Maranello cars struggled throughout the Australian Grand Prix weekend. George Russell benefited from better traction out of the penultimate corner and the ability to carry more speed in the fast section of corners 10 and 11. Lewis Hamilton complicated his race at the start, when in order to avoid the collision with his Maranello teammate, he had to give up his position to Alex Albon. The 7-time Formula One world champion had more pace than the Williams driver, but the lack of push from his Ferrari's traction before the final straight never allowed him to attempt an overtaking maneuver. In conversation with his race engineer Riccardo Adami, the Englishman tried different hybrid strategies, but these attempts were in vain due to the excessive distance from the Thai driver. The configuration of the Ferrari, equipped with a higher downforce rear wing, heavily penalizes it in the straights, making an overtaking attempt with DRS closed almost impossible. At the end of the race, the numbers are unforgiving. The Ferrari's average pace is nearly 2 seconds slower than that of the McLaren's, a huge gap that confirms the Maranello team's difficult first weekend of the 2025 Formula One season. In the first stint, the McLaren duo made the biggest difference in the third sector, the most cornered one, where a good balance is crucial to tackle the turns. In the third sector, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri could brake later than their rivals, while still getting good traction on the exit. The MCL 39 showed very little understeer when entering, always reaching the apex of the corner with ease. On the exit, the rear-end roll and the camber gain of the tires provided excellent grip. Also, thanks to Oscar Piastri's slipstream, Max Verstappen was the fastest in the straights, using aerodynamic efficiency to stay close to the 2 English cars. The Red Bull driver was quite conservative on the braking phase to maintain good traction and try to stay in the slipstream of the papaya-colored cars. To complete the analysis, let's focus on the final part of the Australian Grand Prix. The safety car and the rain, which came only 2 laps after switching to slicks, did not allow for significant data to be gathered. In the final laps with intermediates, Max Verstappen was slightly faster than Lando Norris. With less fuel, he suffered less from traction. The Dutchman matched the Briton in corners while gaining ground in the straights. Oscar Piastri and the two Ferrari cars, on the other hand, were slowed down by the slower cars in the midfield, losing almost 2 seconds per lap. On lap 52, the safety car returns to the pits and the race restarts. At the restart, Charles Leclerc manages to make the most of the traction out of turn 14 and reduces the gap to Lewis Hamilton to just 0.250 seconds. This allows him to latch on to the slipstream of his teammate, gaining a significant advantage on the straight. The top speed is 6 km per hour higher, enough to pull alongside Lewis Hamilton's left rear. At this point, the Monegasque attempts a bold move around the outside of turn 1, trying to take advantage of the better top speed. Telemetry clearly shows that the Monegasque carries much more speed through the center of the corner compared to Lewis, with an increase of as much as 12 km per hour. This result is the outcome of excellent trail braking management, starting the braking phase with a strong stomp on the pedal. In doing so, he maximizes the deceleration and transfers the aerodynamic load to the front, then gradually releases the brake earlier than the Briton. However, the extra speed gained by his Ferrari SF-25 at the apex risks pushing him too wide on the exit, with the danger of going offline or, even worse, colliding with his teammate. To avoid this situation, Charles is forced to apply an additional touch to the brake immediately after the initial release, correcting the racing line before the car slides too much toward the outside. Another interesting aspect is Lewis Hamilton's behavior during this phase. The British driver does not aggressively counter Leclerc's attempt, opting for a more cautious approach. In turn 2, he doesn't keep his foot down and lifts the throttle by about 60%, a choice that appears deliberate. This way, he avoids forcing a risky duel, knowing that the battle could further compromise what was already a disappointing overall result. The Mercedes duo placed immediately behind the leading group in terms of performance, bringing home the most points in the team standings. An excellent performance from Kimi Antonelli, who managed to rise from 16th to 4th. The Italian showed great skill in the rain, bringing the car home without a scratch. Kimi Antonelli was patient in the first part of the race, trying to understand how the car behaved under extreme conditions. Putting aside the spin in the escape road of turn 4, the Italian driver's race was virtually flawless, accompanied by excellent pit strategy from Mercedes. Ferrari needs to lick its wounds after the disastrous Formula 1 weekend to Australia. The Maranello team has, theoretically, understood how to make the car work, as demonstrated on Friday. The problem is that they still have not found the right setup for qualifying and the race. In a few hours, we will be back in the preview of the race week in Shanghai, where we will get a clearer picture of the aerodynamic work of the SF-25 ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix. The bar set by McLaren is extremely high, and for Ferrari it is now essential to react.